energy that thing creates. So hello, and welcome to the all-new Bentley Bentayga. Now I'm just going to put this out there straight away. What a dramatic transformation. When the Bentley Bentayga first launched, its aesthetics split opinion, let's just put it that way. Now, there were certain styling packs and certain colour combinations and specs which would improve on the way it looks, but I always find if you have to justify a car as being spec sensitive, it's never really a reassuring sign that its overall platform is that aesthetically pleasing. This, however, they have really done the works on this. So what the new Bentayga has inherited is the DNA and design language of the Continental GT and the more recent Flying Spur. So it has those sort of diagonal side strakes which come down off the front fascia of it, and it has just transformed the way this thing looks. Also, these sort of flared out nostril-like intakes. All of a sudden, the Bentayga, to my eyes, looks brilliant. When it first launched 5 years ago, I actually couldn't stand the way it hit my eyes, but over time, it grew on me. When I spent time driving them, I appreciated it for what a fantastic platform it was. And now today, here we sit in the refined, heavily facelifted version. And I have to say, to my eyes at least, I think it looks fantastic. This is now one of the better looking SUVs out there. So for a spot of context, just how successful is the Bentayga for Bentley? Well, as I just mentioned, it launched 5 years ago. And in that time, Bentley have sold over 20,000 Bentayga. Is that the right plural for Bentaygas? Bentayga? It is now, it just seemed to fall out of my mouth correctly. Anyway, 20,000 cars, that is an astonishing amount of very expensive SUVs. But actually, it's not overly surprising because still, as we sit here today, the SUV segment is the fastest growing market in the automotive world. So how have Bentley ultimately gone and improved on what was already a really good SUV? Well, interestingly, first of all, the W12 is no longer available in the UK or Europe. That's quite simply down to emissions regulations. You can still order a W12 engine if you live in America, but I'm afraid W12 for the UK is no longer. So what we are left with is the equally stunning twin turbocharged 4-litre V8, 510 horsepower, vast amounts of torque. And actually, as much as I will miss the additional torque and superiority of the W12 engine, if I'm being truthful, the V8 is actually the better balanced and more suitable engine. It's just lighter, it's more dynamic. So while the engine remains the same, the majority of the changes in this car are refinement, aesthetics, and just all-round tweaks and learnings which have fed back from those 20,000 Bentayga clients to the factory to improve on an already fantastic platform. Just as I thought the interiors of Bentleys couldn't get any better, they've gone and done it again. We have this double contrast stitch here. It's clad with lots of carbon fibre. The weave on it is stunning. And then to drive. Now, while it is almost entirely based on the previous generation Bentayga chassis, the platform feels refined. It's very quiet. I mean, actually, for a V8 that I know has a wonderful barbel, it might actually be a little bit too quiet, even when right now I've got this car in sports mode. And actually, I don't think I receive quite enough V8-ness as I might like. Look, I mean, I'm doing this whole take now right here in sport mode, and it's pretty chill. While on the topic of sport mode, down here is still the vastly configurable drive select switch. You can go from sport, which as the name would suggest would be stiffer suspension, slightly more audible exhaust tone, and in this case it really is just slightly. Really no fault of Bentley's own. Everyone in Europe is being forced to bung particulate filters up their derriere, which often will quash one's audible delights. So that's the era we're living in right now. You can go from sport and switch it up into B for Bentley mode. And now this is the pre-configured setting which the Bentley engineers believed is the most optimum for daily use when you're driving around in your Bentayga. It sort of sits in between sport and comfort, rounding off the sharp edges but not making it too soft so you can't grab it by the scruff of its neck and exploit said British B-road. The swell of torque is effortless, and the way that this anti-roll system controls the chassis, it's got a 48-volt anti-roll system. Now, you might be thinking, what does that mean? Why are you throwing these numbers at me? 48 volts leads to the anti-roll system developing more torque than the engine in order to keep the chassis flat. Now, every now and again on this channel, I'll talk about sports cars and supercars having this ability of bending physics. But honestly, a car this heavy with a center of gravity this high should not handle this good. You turn it in, and because you're aware you're in something with an inherent amount of mass, you expect that sort of weight transfer, and it never really comes unless you're really on it. So as a daily proposition, beautifully refined, soft, quiet, comfortable, whack it into sport, you find yourself on a twisty road like this. Before you know it, you're gaining pace beyond acceptability. And in order to shed off that pace, this car is actually running standard steel brakes. Now, you would think for something of this weight, an optional set of carbon ceramics would be available, but actually not right now. So while the aesthetics have dramatically changed on the exterior, what's going on the interior? Well, really, it's all to do with the upgraded infotainment system. We now have 10.9-inch touchscreen display, super crisp. I mean, it's basically 4K, this thing. It's absolutely gorgeous. Importantly, what I am finding in some cars with big touchscreens like this, when you get the sun shining into your cabin, sometimes it can bounce back and completely reflect off the surface, so you can't interact with it. Using this so far, even with this vast sunroof here, the sun hasn't caused too many problems. It's sort of recessed into its own little slot here that creates enough shade that it isn't often interrupted by sunshine, which is always a plus point. These are little details which you might not think about until you see it, and then you're like, why didn't they think of that? Back to the infotainment itself, we now have wireless Apple CarPlay, which is quite literally music to my ears. Not that it's a chore to have to plug in your phone and hide it away under your armrest, but now you can wirelessly charge it, and importantly, you can keep your entire driving area clean and clutter-free without any wires. And Apple CarPlay interacting with Waze for sat-nav, perfect. And the lights, not that I'm testing them out right now, but the lights have been resculpted. So they are the LED matrix lights, which are incredible when they're on. The detail on them is outstanding. And these were originally inspired by the bottom of a fine whiskey glass, a crystal whiskey glass, I may add. But now they have been carved in such a way that even when the lights aren't on, they still glimmer and shine. It's quite a nice aesthetic, actually, because the intricacy and the detail of the lights on this is jewelry in their own right. So it's really nice that they've accentuated those even further. And then inside, let me just shh for 1 second. Serenity. I mean, this is running on 22-inch wheels. Normally, what comes with 22-inch wheels is compromise in terms of ride quality, comfort, and noise, because you generally end up having quite low profile tires in order to adapt to the circumference of them. But this, whatever witchcraft is going on here, despite the fact that these wheels are huge, not only is road noise down to a minimum, they've still managed to make comfort mode actually comfortable. Amazingly, Bentley have managed to squeeze out another 100 millimeters of additional legroom in the back seats. 100 mil. That's huge. Same platform, but how they've managed to achieve it is by resculpting the rear seats. They now have their own frames, completely redesigned, and it has allowed the passenger to sit further back, generating 100 mils worth of extra legroom. And it's not that you purchase a Bentayga with the fuel economy as one of your top priorities. However, if it is remotely on your mind, this V8 also has cylinder shut-off technology. So in effect, it can, when you're on light throttle or on a longer cruise, deactivate one bank of its cylinders, effectively turning it into a 4-cylinder car for optimum efficiency. Not sure how much more juice you'll get out of that experience, but it's there just in case. Actually, the biggest difference is the fact that this car is much nicer both inside and outside. I mean, that's the biggest selling point here, really. It now, to my eyes, looks great. It drives as good as it ever has done, and the refinement and upgrades on the interior have just brought it right up to the latest standards, including beautiful sculptures of the air vents, which have come straight out of the Flying Spur. So when you get in this car, it is top-notch luxury from the get. This is your opportunity to ask any questions or leave any comments below. I shall be spending some more time with Bentley in the future, so any questions you've got, leave them below and I shall put them to them and answer them in any future content. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you next time. Ciao!